On the morning of August 12th, 2000, 26 years ago today, a needle twitched at a listening post in northern Norway. The station listened for secret nuclear tests. What it caught was a small jolt out in the Barents Sea, about the size of a single torpedo going off. A little over 2 minutes later, the needle slammed across the paper. A second blast, hundreds of times the first, violent enough to be picked up by seismographs as far away as Alaska. In Vidyayevo, a fenced-off Navy town in the Russian Arctic, it was an ordinary Saturday. Gray light, laundry strung between the apartment blocks. The wives and mothers of the Northern Fleet felt nothing at all. It would be 2 days before anyone told them anything, and 9 before they were told everything. 118 men were out there, under that sea. The submarine was the Kursk, and the Russian Navy loved her the way a poor family loves its one good thing. She was enormous. More than 500 feet of double-hulled steel, 2 nuclear reactors, built to hunt American aircraft carriers, and so heavily compartmented that her crews believed she could not be sunk. That August, the Northern Fleet had gathered dozens of warships for its largest exercise in more than a decade. Post-Soviet Russia proving it still had a navy. Her task that Saturday morning was simple: fire a practice torpedo, a dummy, no warhead, at the fleet's flagship. In compartment 7, commanding the turbine crew, was Captain-Lieutenant Dmitri Kolesnikov, 27, a submariner's son from St. Petersburg, married for 3 months. Before he sailed, he left his wife Olga a poem that when the hour came to die, though he tried not to think of it, he hoped for time to say, "My darling, I love you." She called it a premonition. The weapon waiting in one of her forward tubes was a bargain with a rotten seam. It ran on kerosene and high-test peroxide, an oxidizer that behaves itself until it meets a catalyst, a fleck of rust, a copper fitting, and then erupts into superheated steam and oxygen. Navies had known for 45 years what peroxide does inside a submarine. In 1955, it burst a torpedo inside the British boat, Sidon, in harbor, and killed 13 men. The Royal Navy junked the fuel. The Americans never fielded it. Russia kept it, for the oldest reason in engineering. It was cheap. The torpedo in the Kursk came from a batch of 10. 6 of the 10 had been rejected for faulty welding. Because practice torpedoes carry no warhead, their welds were inspected less carefully than the armed ones. The safety logic ran exactly backwards. The harmless torpedo got the careless weld. At 11:28 that morning, at periscope depth, the seam let go. The peroxide found its catalyst, and the weapon burst apart inside the tube. The first compartment became a furnace. A little over 2 minutes later, the fire reached the combat torpedoes racked nearby, and they went off together. The second jolt on the Norwegian paper. The blast tore the forward compartments open and drove the boat, nose down, into the seabed, in water so shallow that the Kursk was longer than the sea was deep. Everyone forward of the reactor compartments died at once, or within minutes. The reactors shut themselves down cleanly, automatically, the one system aboard that kept its promise. On the surface, the exercise fleet felt both explosions through its hulls, and nothing happened. Only when the Kursk missed her scheduled radio contact that evening did the fleet begin to search, more than 6 hours after the needle in Norway jumped. Aft of the reactors, 23 men were still alive. From the turbine and machinery rooms, they made their way back through the dying boat to compartment 9, the last one, where the escape hatch was. We know the number because Dmitri Kolesnikov wrote it down. At 13:15, not quite 2 hours after the blasts, in a steady hand, all personnel from Section 6, 7 and 8 have moved to Section 9. There are 23 people here. We made this decision as a result of the accident. None of us can get to the surface. They had escape suits, and they did the arithmetic. 100 meters of freezing water, the pressure climbing, a free ascent would kill them. So they settled in to wait for rescue in the cold, and then, when the emergency power died, in absolute darkness, Kolesnikov kept writing. It's dark here to write, but I'll try by feel. It seems like there are no chances, 10 to 20%. Let's hope that at least someone will read this. And then, regards to everybody. No need to despair. Kolesnikov. On the surface, a different clock was running. For 2 days, officially, nothing had happened. The fleet's commander even called the exercise a success, while his ships were secretly searching. When the Navy finally spoke, on Monday, it said the submarine had descended to the ocean floor, with minor technical difficulties, claimed radio contact, and said everyone aboard was alive. None of it was true. A Russian submersible found the wreck within a day by striking it in the murk, but attempt after attempt to latch onto the escape hatch failed. Dead batteries, storm-heaved seas, a damaged hatch seating. Sonar operators reported tapping from the deep, logged as SOS, water, and the surface believed it was the men. Britain and Norway offered divers and rescue craft. For days, Moscow refused, while officials floated the theory that a NATO submarine had collided with the Kursk. On the 5th day from the Black Sea resort where he had stayed on vacation, Vladimir Putin accepted the foreign help. Norwegian divers reached the wreck on the 8th day and did what the Russian submersibles had failed to do all week. At 7:45 on the morning of August 21st, they opened the aft escape hatch. Compartment 9 was flooded to the ceiling. That evening, the Navy confirmed all 118 were dead, and Admiral Popov, the fleet commander, took off his cap on television and asked the country's forgiveness for not bringing back your boys. What the forensics assembled later is the hardest part. As the oxygen ran down, the men burned chemical cartridges to regenerate the air. One touched the oily water and burst into flash fire. Men dived under the water to escape it. The fire ate the oxygen that remained. The official finding, all 23 were gone within hours of the sinking, before the first night was over, before the surface had even begun to understand. Their families never fully accepted that. They had heard 9 days of promises, and they had heard about the tapping, which the investigation later concluded had not come from the Kursk at all. The next day, Putin came to Vidyayevo to face the families in the garrison's officers' club, several hundred people, a meeting that boiled past midnight. The world remembers 8 seconds of it. Nadezhda Tilik, mother of a lieutenant on the boat, stood and screamed at the officials that they had lied, that the men had been left to die, until a nurse stepped up behind her and injected a sedative straight through her coat, mid-sentence. She sagged and was carried out on camera. The footage aired around the world. Russian state television did not show it. Officials later said the injection was medical, for her heart. Months afterward, Tilik gave her own verdict. The injection was done to shut my mouth. A few weeks later, on American television, Larry King asked Putin what had happened to the submarine. The answer, in full, with a small smile you can watch on the broadcast: it sank. On October 25th, 75 days after the sinking, divers brought Dmitri Kolesnikov up from compartment 9, among the first recovered. The note was folded in his uniform pocket. The Navy read the head count to the world and kept the rest. The note ended with a private message to Olga, and she was never allowed to read all of it. The only conclusion I can come to, she said, is there's something in that note they don't want me to see. He was buried in St. Petersburg that November, the note displayed behind glass. The investigation took 2 years and, in its own words, found stunning breaches of discipline, a rescue unjustifiably delayed, and no one to charge. Russia's own investigators rejected the collision story, and its loudest champion admitted, decades later, he had no proof. The next autumn the wreck was raised, and 115 of the 118 came home. 5 years on, when another small Russian submersible was trapped off Kamchatka, Moscow asked the world for help within a day. All 7 men came up alive. As for Kolesnikov, in the dark, at 10 or 20%, he asked for one thing, that at least someone would read this. 26 years on, reading it is the only rescue that ever reached Compartment 9. The official verdict was written in August of 2002, but the Postmortem writes itself. The only question is whether anyone reads it before the next one.